I'm here today with Paul Johnston. Paul texted me just days after I preached on Titus 2
Yep.
with a wonderful text. He actually said you didn't finish the message. You remember that?
Yes, I did.
And we were talking that day about a number of things. Specifically, he was referencing my mentioning of the stability of older men in the church, and then the discipline of younger men. And one of the things I think you brought up was, Todd, that's great, but what about the men, the guys who have missed their opportunity? Let's say they weren't disciplined. Can they become stable older men, or men who are older and they've never lived a stable life? Are they just hopeless? In fact, you said to me, I feel like there's a sense of hopelessness now for guys who they've missed the boat on this. Is that kind of what you felt, Paul?
Yeah, I felt really burdened for guys that didn't realize that there's more to it, and there is some hope there, but it took me a while to understand that.
Like you didn't miss the train forever.
Right.
So this is God's goal, that older men be stable, younger men be disciplined. But what about guys who are just hearing this? Are they left out, right? Have they missed the train?
If they're listening, even if they're listening deep enough to hear it,
Yeah.
because they are thinking about the sins that they may have committed that they just aren't free of, and so they're not hearing your message.
So we want to say, first of all, and I appreciate your text, all hope is not lost. Amen.
Amen to that.
You may be a man, an older man, a younger man, and you're thinking, I didn't live that way, or I'm not living that way, but I want to. What's my first step, my next step? How can I get to a Titus 2 life? And I think we talked, one of the things you felt pretty strongly about, and I think is biblical, is this idea of coming clean is like the first step to becoming that kind of older man or younger man. Expand on that a little bit, Paul.
Yeah.
I know from your own life even.
Yeah, just, a year ago, I wouldn't have heard this message like I heard it this year, and that's because I've been able to get a light shined on some things in my life that were really holding me back spiritually. Wasn't able to enjoy all the blessings that God has for us because I was wrapped up in some sin and just stuff that had been there for years and never confessed. And the good news is I did hear the message this year, but then I started thinking about my friends that were there in the service that weren't listening at all, and they was just passing them by. And those guys, as well as myself, there are times when we think the window is closed, that there's just too much fear and too much guilt to confess. And we'll just hold on to that. We'll hold on to that, but we're missing out on God's blessing, and we're not supposed to do that. We're supposed to enjoy every bit of that we can. So,
and there is hope. You're saying then in the courage and the action of confessing and being open about our sin to God and to others.
That's correct. Yeah.
And you've experienced this in the last year or so. You said.
Just in the last year. God's worked through some things and been able to draw Cindy and I together at a level where I've been able to confess some areas of my life that I'd never told her about, that I just kept hidden from her, and there was no light shown on that. And after shining light on different situations, because there were just things in my life that started at the age of about 8 years old that I hid, and I hid them before everybody. I was just too ashamed and afraid to let anybody know.
For decades.
For years.
Yeah.
And we got to a point in our relationship where it was time for me to confess these things. And I'll be honest, Todd, I didn't think I ever would. I thought I would go to my grave with some of this stuff, never confessed. But God worked in me and convicted me to be able to share in love the things that I'd gone through. And it is such a beautiful change in my life to be able to live in the light instead of in that darkness.
So you're actually afraid that if you shared, it would be worse, but God proved faithful. And in your coming cleanness, we'll call it, God brought you and your wife closer. You're experiencing a closer intimacy with Christ. It's the opposite of what you thought would happen.
It's exactly true. God's not there to destroy our lives. He's there to restore our lives. And so through shining light on some of the issues and some of the sins that I'd committed, God was able to start to restore Cindy and I, building a new relationship. She didn't know me for 38 years. She didn't really know who I was. But after confession of sin, after I was able to confess to her and to God and accept forgiveness, then God started to rebuild and we're still in it. We're still in the infancy
you're
of it,
right.
but I'll tell you what, it's still beautiful. It's beautiful because we work through it together. And so that, we're looking for restoration, we're looking for trust building again, and we're just looking for God to restore our marriage and then use us, use me and her together to help other people. The walls were so thick in my life and so deep that even when I confessed some of my sin, there was time where I still was numb to it. I would look at it like that couldn't have been me, but those were things I did. And God's working through that part right now with me too, showing us the beautiful result. So when I said finish the message, I was thinking, Todd, you're not done. Finish it. Let the guys know that there is hope out there.
Amen.
But chapter 11, or verse 11, 12, and 13, and 14, they do go into that. But I was
They
so...
do. The grace of God, His mercy with us, yes.
The grace of God. And the grace teaches us how to be the men that He wants us to be, And
But that's not a matter of just white knuckling and pretending that we're something that we're not, or that these things never happened. You're saying be honest about it.
absolutely.
And this speeding train of being a disciplined young man or a stable older man doesn't pass you by. God's grace puts you on that train at the point in life you're in, if you're honest about your sin.
And that was the amen at the end of it. I kind of accused you of not finishing, but maybe I just wasn't finished in my heart with the whole thing.
One thing I love about our church and I love about you, Paul, is the willingness to say, hey, to interact about the message. You have a limited time to try to communicate the truth, and no preacher does it perfectly every time. So I loved your text and this chance now to talk about how God has brought stability into your older man experience, and it wasn't too late for you, and it started with just coming clean to your wife. Hey, let's chat about one more thing. Some men might hear this and think, well, I'm going to run to my wife these 6 things or these 2 things. And there's a certain way as well to come clean. Wouldn't you agree?
I would.
A certain way to talk about your past so that it's actually beneficial and not a burden. Any insight there you want to add?
Well, I know that in my past, I always thought, if I just asked God for forgiveness, that it would just all go away. And I lived that way for years. It was kind of in the background of the way I was raised, that we could just confess our sins and move on and sin again. Unfortunately, but as I think about it, I came to you. I wanted to share with my pastor some of the things that were wrong. So I had accountability outside of my marriage, and I also, I shared with my wife, and then as time went on, I also shared with my daughters, because those are the ones that are most affected. I also shared with my Lighthouse group, because I was really leading and wasn't right. I was kind of a false witness, if you will. It's the way I look at it. And so I kind of let them know. And what they did? They did exactly what you did and everybody else. They just wrapped their arms around me and prayed for me, and they're helping me get through this. And they're part of that. So you have to be careful when you share and who you share with. But
That's
if you
good
go
advice.
to your pastor, if you go to your pastor, he's going to help you kind of walk through those stages, and he's going to help you. Someone will help you at that.
It's interesting. I think when I hear that, I hear about a guy who took it strategically, incrementally. You were transparent, but at the right time, in the right way, to the right people. You weren't a loose cannon, trying to unload your guilt quickly. But you said, hey, I want to process this appropriately. And I appreciate the way you did that. It is obviously you living out James 5, 1 John 1, of walking in the light. We have better fellowship with God and with others. It's proven to be a blessing in your life.
It's working. We're so happy. Like I said before, there's still areas, there's tough times. And we talk about some real tough issues. It's not easy. And God's still showing me. He'll take me back, and I say that through people, but he's kind of like taking me back to my childhood and bringing me forward again and say, well, you missed this. You remember this? And he'll show me areas of my life that, oh, that makes sense. Now that makes sense. Makes a little bit more sense. And because I covered stuff up so much, I never thought about things. And that's dangerous. It's really dangerous. And you get disconnected from that. And through this process, and Cindy and I were just talking about it this morning, I am so glad he's putting me through this process, Because if he just fixed things overnight, I'd be right back at it again. It's too simple. So he's helping me walk through this with consequences, with tough times, with highs and lows. And that's okay,
Yeah.
because the highs are really great and the lows are not so low. They're getting better. So we'll just keep moving,
You got a good trajectory, right?
Yeah. And then my heart for those that have not. I know I got friends and family members that are still struggling, with things that they've done and haven't come clean. It's just you got to take a step forward to make a change.
Amen. So let's see if we can summarize this. If you're a young man and you feel like the life of discipline that Titus 2 describes is something past you, Paul's saying it's not.
It's not too late.
Yeah, it's not too late. Just take the first step of confessing and coming clean to someone you trust in an appropriate way first. If you're an older man, you feel like, man, my life's not stable and I must have missed it. You're saying it's not too late.
It's not too late.
Again, the key, just come clean, be honest with your sin to God and to others. And the blessing of that kind of confession will actually be the very thing Titus talks about, discipline and stability. Paul, thanks for your testimony.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for nudging me to finish the message.
Yeah. Well, thanks for listening.
You're welcome.